Good evening. I'm Phillip in New York. Let's get right to what America's talking about. The White House is ramping up its defense after a severe backlash to President Trump's Memorandum of Understanding with Iran. Even key Republicans are doubting the terms of Trump's negotiations.
Iran's left stronger. We are left weaker. There's a lot of stuff in there. It's bad.
Everything I've heard about it causes me concern.
Whether or not you can land this deal with Iran, I don't know.
I certainly would want to give Iran money. History demonstrates that giving billions of dollars to theocratic lunatics who want to murder us is an exceptionally bad idea. And I think, unfortunately, the president is receiving some really bad advice on this deal.
Trump isn't taking too kindly to all the bad reviews. He lashed out, writing, "These fools who think I haven't been tough enough on Iran are either jealous, bad people, or stupid." In the meantime, several sources tell CNN that the U.S. and Iran are laying out secret proposals for implementing the 14-point deals signed this week. That includes details on how to address Iran's nuclear program. Now, the sources emphasize that these are far from final. However, it does raise questions about whether the administration overstated the commitments that it got from Iran. But that's not how Trump sees any of this at all.
What have you learned about not just the exercise of power, but the limits on your power as a result of the conflict?
There are no limits.
No limits.
No, I haven't learned that lesson yet. I know there are, but, there are no limits.
Beginning a conflict, you had talked about you only wanted unconditional surrender. And the MOU doesn't look like unconditional surrender.
Well, it really probably is unconditional surrender.
It is?
I think so.
Now, just tonight, as Vice President Vance was supposed to head to Switzerland, they've announced that that trip has been canceled. They're saying that, the negotiations are still sort of working behind the scenes. They're blaming technical challenges to that. But it is kind of interesting because I also just want to note that we're hearing actually from the Iranians now, and they're kind of being pretty strong on this. Mohammad Ghalibaf, the Iranian parliament speaker, says, "In the event of bad faith, breach of contract, and excessive demands by the opposing side, we have no hesitation in delivering a crushing response to the enemy. They were once slapped during the war. If they wish to tread that path again, they will receive an even harder slap." And the new Supreme Leader Khomeini also put out a statement basically saying, we're not going to back down on our demands. It feels like they are gearing up for the 60-day period of negotiation, basically saying, we're holding the line. And maybe they think that they can.
And if they do, as the president made very clear, the bombing will recommence. I mean, this is, I'm not going to take much credit in what I'm hearing from Iranian media. Of course, they're going to make that kind of a bombastic statement. They have to save face with their own people. This is a regime that is in shreds as a result of what this country did. And I think we shouldn't be surprised to hear that kind of thing. But it doesn't bother me at all, and I don't think it bothers the president, and I don't think it bothers our military.
Well, I think that everything you just said can basically apply back to Donald Trump, because that's exactly what happened. You see Donald Trump running around saying that people are stupid, per se, but I think the only stupid one is him. Let's look at the terms of the deal. $400 billion to the Iran. I mean, well, look,
it's not a deal. It's an MOU.
Let's make sure we're okay with semantics.
Right. It's not semantics.
Well, let's do it. $400 billion to the Iranian regime, $100 billion in sanction relief, $300 billion in a reconstruction fund. That's a lot of money flowing to the regime. That doesn't sound like unconditional surrender.
Well, let's pick that apart. The $300 billion that we're talking about for reconstruction does not go to the regime. It goes to corporations. It's an investment, and it's to rebuild the infrastructure that the world relies upon for the oil supply chain. And it's going to be paid for primarily by the Gulf states.
Who's going to get the revenue from the oil sales?
No, I understand that.
So if you're going to commit to rebuilding Iranian infrastructure, who gets the revenue from that? You just lifted sanctions on Iranian oil.
There will be, as part of the program in the plan, there will be IMF oversight over those funds. They will not be allowed to run Iranians. They will not be allowed. They will not be allowed to run.
None of that has been
finalized.
Said by the administration. And look, we bombed them. The Iranians have been clear they want reparations for that. And now there's a vehicle by which they could potentially get it for a war that we started, which is kind of amazing to think about. But that's really what's being contemplated here. But even if we don't get to that, apparently immediately, according to this MOU, they get oil and gas sanctions waivers. They are able to sell their oil and gas on the open market in a way that they haven't for a very long time. That is going to net them tens of billions of dollars every single month. So the president, I think, what's interesting is that I think that he feels like he can say that it's been unconditional surrender, but then he also says things like this. This is more from Axios. He says, the only way I can get tougher is if I go in there for another 2 or 3 weeks and continue to bomb the hell out of them, right? But where does that get us? The Strait of Hormuz will not be open. He seems to know that more bombing is not actually going to help the situation, which is why he decided to just cut his losses.
Feels like leverage to me. He doesn't want gas prices getting up to $5 and $6 a gallon. And the Iranians know that. Yes, they're being bombastic, by the way, but they also know they have leverage here. It's clear to me somebody was walking around the Senate with a thesaurus today because the Republicans found 8 different ways of saying this is terrible. Republicans, he's getting bad advice. This is appeasement, a colossal failure, very concerning. These are his teammates in the party. And oh, by the way, the House Republicans aren't in town, or we'd be hearing from dozens of them expressing their concern. This is a political mess. And if he wants to turn the page on Iran, he has just glued the book open for at least 60 more days.
Well, the problem is he also doesn't have any options, and he's running out of options here, and he knows that. And what is very unfortunate is that Iran holds all the cards at this point, and they understand that they have the president in America in a very vulnerable position right now. Something that was supposed to last a few weeks is now lasting months, could last. Now he's saying that he could potentially now bomb them again. So this 60-day potential deal or whatever, it has to be better, by the way, than the JCPOA, because if it is not, then I think that is a complete failure on Donald Trump's part. And Donald Trump has not shown us one bit that he has the leadership to actually produce something that is better. There is not one part of this process whatsoever from the beginning, whether he is claiming he obliterated the nuclear program, which he absolutely didn't. He has not been truthful to the American people at all. And every step of the way, it has been a failure. And this is going to be part of his legacy moving forward.
Let me play Mike Pompeo, the former Trump Secretary of State and CIA Director. This is his assessment of the deal that Trump struck.
There's also some things there that just don't make any sense to me. To somehow think that because they've written down on a piece of paper something they've promised for decades that they won't build a nuclear weapon, that's foolish at best. There's 3 M's, right? Mm-hmm. We now are going to say it's okay for them to have missiles. We're going to allow them to have money. The sanctions relief that we're about to provide them is going to give them billions of dollars, and they'll rebuild many of their programs. And so that's the second M. That's a mistake. And the third one is this idea that somehow there are Iranian moderates. There's no such thing. These are all radical Islamists. And so only time will tell how this agreement will play out.
No one has been more emphatic about this idea that the Iranians have changed their ways than JD Vance, who's, I guess, supposed to be the chief negotiator here for the government. He has, in several interviews this week, really hammered home that he just believes that they've had a change of heart. They're ready to do things differently. They're ready to come to us and be a part of the global stage. And Mike Pompeo is pointing out that makes no sense. I mean, and that's what this whole deal is kind of predicated on.
Yeah, the triumph of hope over experience. Look, I think this is fundamentally a very pragmatic deal given the political situation. And you highlighted some of the folks who were critical of it. All of those Republicans who are criticizing it, they either lost their primary, they either are not running for re-election, or they're running in deep red, or they are running in deep red states.
Not Roger Wicker and not Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz is
he's not up for re-election this year.
It doesn't. I mean, so what's the matter?
Okay.
Like, are the only people that like who does
my
count?
point though?
We've eliminated a lot of people.
Okay,
you're not even talking about the House at this point.
My point is that this is a pragmatic deal, and a lot of Republicans actually have been thrilled to see this as the outcome. But how is it alarmed? They were alarmed. Can I speak for like more than 2 seconds?
I just want to know how it's pragmatic.
They were alarmed heading into the midterms that there were some documents to suggest we would have $7 gas prices. So I think Republicans are glad to see that now gas prices are down below $4 a gallon on average nationally. We're going to see inflation come down. They are glad and relieved to see that Iran is going to be on the back burner and they can focus on domestic issues.
Lydia, how can
and
you say that they're going to be on the
socialist candidates. And so, again, there's many Republicans who are glad to have some sort of relief valve because
it's not going to be on the back burner. Okay, first of all, this MOU is lasting 60 days. You're getting closer and closer to the midterm elections. If he does not come up with a solution that is better than the JCPOA, there is no way that this is resolved before the midterm elections, and every vulnerable Republican is going to have to deal with this. When it comes to gas prices, first of all, they're potentially opening the strait. This strait was not.
It's open.
And we've heard that. We have heard.
Are we just going to ignore the $400 billion going to Iran? Like, are we just going to ignore that?
On the strait, we have been told.
That is untrue.
I want to ask you a question. Have we been told several times that the strait will open?
Yes, of course we have.
And has it opened every single time?
I don't know if it's open.
It has not.
I tell you this morning, as of this morning, ILS traffic is showing ships going through the strait.
Why is the strait?
Not Republicans, not Democrats.
Why was the strait closed? Why was the strait closed?
Why was the strait closed?
Why was the strait closed?
Because the Iranians closed it.
Because Donald Trump caused it to be closed. So at the end of the day, we are now at an MOU that is putting us back to where we were at the beginning of this thing, which means the United States hasn't gotten us
I think if you ask people living in Iran right now, they would have probably a very different perspective if it's just the way it was
the
before the
Ayatollah is
war
still
started.
there. The regime is still there. The people are still being oppressed. I don't know what you're talking about.
Now they just have $400 billion more than what they had before. When did that become a
Mark,
consideration?
I do wonder. I mean, you just brought up the Iranian people. Their lives haven't changed.
Yeah.
For the better. They're still being run by Ayatollahs.
With $400 billion more dollars.
There's nothing in, if you're an Iranian right now.
The money's not going to the regime. It's not going to the regime.
If you're an Iranian right now, what has changed for you? You still have the same structure, government structure that you had before. Now you have that government structure being promised billions of dollars of funds that only helps to reinforce their control over society. What positives are they getting out of it?
Probably not a lot, Abby, but we kind of have to pick a lane, don't we? Right? Either we want to have this humanitarian purpose, which is going to require a more dedicated effort there and higher gas prices. Let's be honest, for the American people, this is about their wallets and what they pay at the pump, and we have no tolerance for it.
But why did you
launch this war? There's no patriotic mission behind this. It's not like World War II. Like, let's go and work and weld airplanes and be part of the war effort and buy war bonds. That doesn't exist anymore. That's part of what President Obama was talking about.
That's a transparent answer because
it's an honest one.
Basically, it is that we don't have the stomach for this, which is what the Iranians knew. And what's interesting, this is the one more from JD Vance. He was asked about what's to stop the Iranians from just rebuilding the whole thing that the United States bombed. Here's what he said.
What's stopping them from down the road, to your point, rebuilding and restarting from where we were pre the war?
Well, number one, they would have to get a lot of money in order to rebuild their nuclear program. You're talking about billions and billions of nuclear infrastructure that the United States destroyed. In order for them to rebuild that program, they would have to get a lot of money.
Well, viewer, they are getting a lot of money. They are getting billions and billions of dollars right now, according to this MOU. And they could, to Isaiah's point, get billions and billions more. Let's take the $300 billion out of it. $100 billion in sanctions relief. A sanctions relief available to them potentially that exceeds anything that we have ever offered this particular regime.
And what's really interesting is that in the MOU, it says that the free passage of the Strait of Hormuz is really only guaranteed for 60 days. So if they begin to start charging tolls for every ship that comes across the strait, that's another revenue stream for the regime.
Well, which they have indicated that they will.
All of this is conditional. It's explicit in the MOU. It's conditional on a deal being reached, on the finer points being achieved,
in the deal is that listed?
Including as it relates to their nuclear program.
Is this the gentleman's agreement that has been somehow tacitly worked out with people who may not be characterized as gentlemen?
I completely agree with that, Scott, and that's part of one of the things that worries me the most about this is even if we had a deal that made everyone happy, Republican and Democrat, everyone at this table, would be one hell of a deal, by the way. What's to say that the Iranians would actually live up to it? This is a part of the world that, unfortunately, for the people that live there, have 1,000+ year history of this kind of conflict, stress, and turmoil. And unfortunately, we got to pick a lane, and the American people have to decide, what do we have the stones for? And right now, what we have the stones for is to fill our cars and go on a 4th of July weekend and pay less than $4 a gallon.
The American people are currently not doing
$400 billion more.
I think that's about as accurate as we can get here. We don't have the tolerance for a long war, which is why Trump wants to end this one. Next for us, a pretty extraordinary warning from JD Vance to Israel, telling critics that Trump is their only ally and that they can't, quote, kill their way out of security threats. Plus, former President Obama hosting a star-studded opening of his presidential library, and he gave America some advice regarding Donald Trump. Tonight, as a rift emerges between the U.S. and Israel over Trump's Iran deal, JD Vance is lashing out, responding to reporting that Trump's Iran agreement with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took him by surprise, and it sent him fuming. JD Vance had a warning for critics of the deal in Israel.
You've seen people within Bibi's cabinet who have come out and attacked the deal and in some ways very personally attacked the President of the United States. And I guess my message to them would be twofold. Number one, Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world's superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world. Anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in.
I have to say, I did not have on my bingo card JD Vance being the attack dog against Israel for this administration. What do you think is going on?
Yeah, this was quite the week for JD Vance, making a lot of headlines. He's a very skilled politician, and he's giving voice to a certain faction on the right who are now blaming Israel for getting America into the war. And I think to an extent, that's kind of a straw man, but that is a very vocal portion of the right. I think our interests are far more aligned. We've always known that they would diverge at some point, and evidently this is the point that JD Vance thinks they diverge, but I am very sensitive because they are on the front lines dealing with the outcome of this. There's already a report that Iran is promising Hezbollah funds, and they're going to be the ones who are dealing with that far more than we are. So I understand that Israel is scared and alarmed, and I think it's very reasonable that they would feel that way.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, according to the polling, support for Israel has only decreased in the last couple of years. Now, 57% of lean GOPers or GOPers say have an unfavorable view of Israel. That's up from 35% in 2022. This is sort of like the Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly view of the world. And it's almost as if JD Vance's sense is that Trump is giving him a little bit of space because Trump is a little annoyed with Netanyahu. And so that gives him some space to sort of align himself with that pocket of MAGA. But what's interesting is that if a Democrat had said anything like that, whoa, I mean, they would be called an anti-Semite, period.
That's it. Well, I don't know if there's anything anti-Semitic about what was said, right?
No,
I
they
mean,
would just be called anti-Semitic.
I'm not saying
like rubber, your glue kind of stuff.
To be clear,
if Josh Jennings were here, he would say that.
It's an important point. To be clear,
is he?
I am not saying that it is anti-Semitic, but I am saying that for at least the last several years, any critique of Israel, its conduct in wars in Gaza, in Lebanon, how it conducts itself in the region in general has been Republicans have accused Democrats of being anti-Semitic for pointing any of those things out.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to make those kind of generalizations, Abby. I think at the end of the day, this at least puts to rest arguments that the president and this administration are just pawns of Israel, and it's really Bibi that's running the show, because we've certainly heard plenty of that nonsense.
That's just what Mike Johnson said.
Well, is he here to defend himself?
Well, that's what Mike Johnson said. I mean, that's what he said the day after this whole thing got started.
Listen, I've thought that was a ridiculous remark to begin with. And this is Trump being a deal maker. Bibi and Israel were in the way to get to this MOU. They were not invited to the table. That got Netanyahu pretty upset to the point that, from certainly the sources I have in D.C., there have been some pretty heated communiques between the two leaders. And I think a line had to be drawn in the sand. They will be brought back into the fold during these 60 days. I would be shocked if Israel and their concerns and considerations were left out completely of the negotiation of a final deal. Once again, this is an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding. It is not a final deal. It's not.
There are so many bear traps here. You have many problems,
give you a few more if you want.
political problems that just unfolded in just what JD Vance said and the dialogue we're having here. Using the terms, we're the only one, the only powerful ally, the only option you have. Obviously, that could fracture international relationships at a time when you might want to be building some consensus. That's one possible bear trap. Lydia makes a point, and I subscribe to it, that a portion of the right wanted to hear this. This is not the time on a calendar to talk about portions of your political party. You're less than 140 days out from an election, and you are building in fractures inside your own party. And respectfully, there are very endangered incumbent Republicans who need to have this unifying moment.
It's not, unless you're running for president, which is what JD Vance is doing. I mean, that's why this is so interesting, is because this is not just the vice president. It's also the vice president who wants to be president, who has to build something of his own MAGA base. And then he goes even further in this interview with the New York Times, where he basically suggests that Israel is trying to kill its way out of problems. Listen.
I don't think Bibi himself has actually criticized the deal, because I think he's maybe a little bit more familiar with the details of what's in it. But yeah, you've seen people in their system, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who've attacked the deal. And I guess my response to them would be, what is your exact proposal? And, you know, you're a country of 9 million people. You can't just kill your way out of solving every single national security problem that you have.
Honestly, I think there are a lot of Republicans who would say, actually, yes, they can. That has been really the policy that many Republicans have, which is that Israel has a right to kill who they need to kill in order to maintain safety and security of their borders.
Yeah, I think absolutely Republicans would agree with that. And also, where was this judgment from JD Vance before this war even started? It seems like this is a sort of new thing. And I agree that it sounds like JD Vance is running for president and is potentially facing a primary and now has to kind of figure out what his space is in the MAGA world in order to make a case to get through a Republican primary. But at the end of the day, I think that what Trump has done throughout this whole term is that he does not care who our allies are. And it seems like JD Vance is sort of taking that on as well, where they kind of they don't make friends, and it ends up hurting them moving forward.
Do you think that it will work? If it works for Trump, would it work for Vance?
I'm not sure it works for Vance at this point. Also, I mean, Donald Trump, Donald Trump he is not running for president. He does not care. He does not care about the political implications of any decision, including the midterms. He does not care about any of that. JD Vance has an entire political career. He is young. He is someone, if he does not run for president this time around, he will run for president next time around. And I think that he is the face of this war now.
I just think that it's very interesting, because I've sat at this table so many times and we keep hearing, oh, Trump doesn't care about affordability. I think he cares a lot. And obviously he was negotiating a deal, but even just in the last day, he said, look, I don't want to be responsible for depression. I think he's extremely aware, and I think that's why he made this deal, is because he recognized his base was growing weary with the war, and that's what pushed him.
Yeah, I guess. Can I just say, okay, yes, you just said what I was going to say. Sorry. I do think there might be a difference, right, between I believe that there is an affordability problem, and I don't want to have the legacy of Herbert Hoover. In Trump's mind, those are not the same thing, and that's a real distinction. He does care about how the history books write about him. Not so much what the fate of Republicans are going to be in November when they're facing the voters at the polls. Former President Barack Obama celebrated the opening of his presidential center today, and the event had former presidents, celebrities, musicians, and, of course, a call to action. We'll be right back. Tonight, the Obama Presidential Center is officially open. All 4 other living former presidents and first ladies attending the opening ceremonies on the south side of Chicago today, along with a number of celebrities. President Obama took the podium and encouraged Americans not to lose faith in each other and to remember that collective voices and how we treat each other matters. Forgetting that fact, he says, only gives power to those trying to divide us.
For us to give in now, after all this country's been through, to cynicism and division would be a betrayal of our founding ideas. And I remain convinced that the overwhelming majority of Americans feel the same way.
So in some ways, this was like church for liberals. It was. Everybody was dressed in their Sunday finest and sitting in the pews. And he was delivering a message about, not just about that, but also actually there was a lot of contrast happening about Trump in the remarks from him, and I'll play some a little bit later from Michelle Obama. What did you make of it?
You know, I really thought it was great that he didn't mention Trump's name one time. You know, he did mention him one time, and I think that, frankly, America got to get a chance to remember what it was like to have a president that could really give speeches that united us as a country. And I think what's really interesting is that, you know, Trump spent decades criticizing Barack Obama on literally everything that he could do. And then ultimately, he got a chance to see on the day that, you know, Obama opened up his presidential center, Trump got to negotiate a pretty bad deal. And I think that it's really just a reflection of why it's important to talk about history. I think a lot of people are going to be able to learn about the JCPOA. And as this MOU comes into fruition, they'll be able to see exactly the contrast there.
I do want to play this from Michelle Obama because she alludes to these attacks on her husband from people like Trump, for example. Here's what she said.
The claims that a U.S. senator and constitutional law expert wasn't qualified for the job. The lies about your birthright, your faith, your patriotism. The outrage when you stated the biological fact that if you'd had a son, that he too would be black. Yet, you were unflappable at every turn. Always focused, always calm, always looking at the long view.
And what she's not saying there is that that is a contrast with the guy in the White House right now.
You know, the words we didn't hear from these remarks today: sucker, loser, piggy, stupid, fake news, idiot. It's a permission structure when a president uses those terms for our children to hear it and our children to want to use those terms as well. It's modeling the worst of rhetoric and the worst of behavior. President Obama, First Lady Obama, didn't invoke the name calling that has gotten in a cancerous way into our political bloodstream and makes us not want to expose our children to the highest people in power.
And Mark, I saw you nodding. I mean, do you agree with that?
I do. I have, as I think you know, tremendous respect for President Obama. I had the privilege of actually being in Grant Park on election night with the Obamas and the Bidens, watching the results of that campaign. I'll never forget that moment. And I think what this was really about, I don't think this would have been the place for that kind of political rhetoric. This was not a political event. This is the dedication of a presidential library. And he did it and gave that speech with the class and grace that is consistent with Barack Obama. I might not have agreed with all of his policies, but when it comes to being someone that was, I think, a president that crossed party lines, and I think we'll see later on remains very highly popular from people that both lean right and left, I think what we saw today was consistent.
Okay.
And that's
There's a little bit of revisionist history. Yeah, he's incredibly eloquent. He's a very skilled orator. He's very articulate. I'll give him all of that. But he was also a very divisive figure.
How?
And can I talk? Can I talk? Thank you.
This is a good one.
Look, we saw it was on full display. They open it up with perhaps the most performative woke thing you can do, a land acknowledgement. Really? You're going to say this is on stolen land? If you think it's on stolen land, then give it back.
This is all you. I mean, this is like Tan Suit 2.0.
Don't build an $850 million library on it. The other thing is, I know I like the idea that he united Americans, but I don't think most conservatives.
But how is he the
conservatives
most
who were targeted by the IRS, nuns who were told they had to pay for abortions and contraceptives, and he was very divisive.
Can I just say, when you're talking about things that using federal government, first of all, Obama did not target the federal government for his opponents. That is something that Trump is doing.
Well, I think
hold on. I let you talk. That he also did not do that. What I will say, one of the bigger contrasts, I think, that has not been mentioned, I think, over the coverage is you have to remember that when Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump, it was Barack Obama who called Hillary Clinton and told her, you need to concede. And he understood that there needed to be a peaceful transfer of power, and he told her that. Then what happened? He welcomed the Trumps to the House, to the White House. He ensured that they had what they needed in order to have a peaceful transition. Take that, and then take January 6th. And look at that contrast. I'm not done. But listen to that contrast. Then there is also, Barack Obama has done a lot to raise the next generation of leaders, while you have Donald Trump, who is just saying, I anoint people.
Well, let me let Lydia respond to that, because I hear you saying, first of all, you're accusing Obama of personally doing something that
his administration.
Well, we know that what you're talking about at the IRS was the responsibility of individuals within the IRS who were held responsible for that. That had nothing to do with Obama. Right. And you've never provided, nobody has provided proof that that came from the White House or from the president's office. The second thing that you mentioned, which is basically abortion policy, I take it that is your view of how that policy should operate in this country. But you have to understand that another half of the country believes the opposite of what you believe. Right. So when you talk about divisiveness, Barack Obama was smeared as not being a legitimate president because Trump was lying that he was not a native-born American citizen. And then he welcomed that same man into the White House. Right. Their wives sat down and had tea. So what else?
I think Obama is incredibly classy. I think he's incredibly
It's a legitimate question. What else? Why is Obama considered by a lot of conservatives, and maybe you're one of them, to be so incredibly divisive? Is it because he told people he was black?
Right.
No, I think he's incredibly classy. He's a very eloquent speaker. I think there's a lot of things to credit him for.
Lydia,
I'm saying his policies, you know, and I will credit him for this as well. He said that he thinks America is great today. I think he said the U.S. is an undeniable force for good in the world. And I was glad to hear him say that, because when he was in office, he would go on these sort of tours essentially apologizing for America. And I look at the Democratic Party today, 36% of whom are not proud.
Last year, Donald Trump went to the Middle East, and he said that America's past policies of regime change in that region had been a failure. Right. And that it was that we were trying to basically overtake these great societies. He was literally, what you guys accuse Obama of doing, Trump went to the Middle East and said that we've been trying to change your societies and we have failed, and we've been trying to export our way of doing things on you. He said that last year.
Right.
So I am not understanding this. Like, or at least I want to see more evidence. I would like to see more evidence. That's all I would like to see.
In that respect, circumstances changed a bit, right? Iran advanced their nuclear program much more rapidly than expected. There were changes in
that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking what Trump was talking about was the U.S. military involvement in the Middle East, Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and beyond. It was a very broad statement. She just said Obama was apologizing for the United States around the world. Where's the evidence? That's all I'm asking.
Well, so I think we're missing the point of what President Obama was trying to say during the speech. This was not an anti-Trump speech. This was not, let's get back at him. This was, we need to come back together as a nation. We shouldn't have states opting out of the 250th anniversary celebration in D.C. as a political statement. That I heard that this morning. It was absolutely heartbreaking news to hear that that's even being considered. And I don't think that Barack Obama is terribly happy with the state of his own party right now.
Yeah.
It looks very different than it did when he was in the Oval Office. It's much more polarized. It's been had quite a lot of woke and other influences that I don't think that Barack Obama was a woke president. That wasn't even a thing when he was.
But look, here's the thing. I get that you might get it, but I'm really focused on this. When you say that President Obama is one of the most divisive presidents in history, that's something that you guys can never back up. You never can bring up any substance. It's a talking point that you guys always say. So to Abby's point, what specifically are you referring to when you say he's one of the most divisive presidents in history?
He did not invite Milli Vanilli to the library party today, or Vanilla Ice, or CNC Music Factory. That's a difference from the American 250.
Right.
That
Didn't
is a
have
big
that on my
difference from the
bingo
American
card.
250.
For sure.
That is very true. Next for us, a new book reveals how the president claimed he's more powerful than Stalin or Mao or Hitler. We'll discuss next.